Hi everyone, my name is Abby Bender and this is my advocacy plan for equitable literacy assessment. I would say my activism for literacy really started when I began this program at Illinois State. And based on the work that I've done in this class thus far and the work that I've completed in previous classes has really helped kind of start this activism. And in a previous class, we were able to take a deep dive into our literacy workshop, specifically with our RTI and kind of that MTSS umbrella as a whole. And that was nice just to be able to see how things are done in more of a critical lens and see where we could use more work in my district and in my school. And some other areas would be culturally responsive teaching. And so I like to use this textbook by Zaretta Hammond, and it just talks a lot about some great things with with our culturally diverse students, and also the Reading to Make a Difference textbook by Laminack and Kelly. And this is a great resource because at the end of each chapter, it gives a list of textbooks and mentor texts that you can use with your students. And so there's picture books and there's chapter books, and it really is a great starting place, I think, for wanting to take action and just thinking more deeply about literacy and literature as a whole. And then I also put two websites that I was introduced to, which is the Lee and Low Books and the diversebooks.org. And this is just great resources for you to search any diverse books that you can think of, and it's all categorized based on grade level or a certain topic that you want to talk about. And so I highly recommend checking these out. The first goal that I'm going to focus on would be inside our school as a whole, and that is to include more diverse text within our literacy curriculum and as well as the assessments. For the rationale behind my first advocacy goal that I chose, I first wanted to bring in the discussion by Thomas and Dykes of the Fountas and Pinnell Leveled Literacy Kit and the texts that are used in that. After reading this article a couple weeks ago, it really stuck with me because Fountas and Pinnell is the main resource that we use in the curriculum we use for our literacy. We just adopted word study and as well as their reading mini lessons along with the read aloud book and curriculum. And so I really found this interesting. And so I pulled the quote that really talked about the study and the findings of how people of color tended to have more negative connotations, and maybe the characters in the books were seen as making poor choices within the fiction books. And then with the nonfiction books, which were mostly about white people, they tended to have a more positive connotation. So they were dedicated or something good happened with them, with these characters. And so another alarming fact was that there was no stories about Asian or indigenous people, and Black and the Latinx characters are seen as inferior or portrayed as needing help or saved. And so with those white characters in the nonfiction books, they are seen as heroic or successful. And I think that this brings some huge concerns because with my school, we use the Fountas and Pinnell Leveled Literacy Kit as a big part of our data collection. And so this would really, some students may feel shame or like they're not important or their voice isn't heard because of the way that they see these characters and how they're depicted in these Fountas and Pinnell texts. And so it's important that I advocate and do some work and make sure that we are getting more diverse texts for our literacy assessments. And so then that goes along with what Ebe claims from the article talking about culturally relevant text with English language learners in the classroom, and how it's hard for students to draw on background knowledge or experiences in order to make meaning. And so then they might not read that book as proficiently as some of their peers. And so we need to make sure that we are accounting for all students within our mentor text or our text that we're using for assessments, and making sure that the content and the language really matches and follows our students, and that everybody is depicted in a positive light. For the timeline of this goal, for the present day right now, I will continue researching about the pros and cons of Fountas and Pinnell, and I've actually been having some conversations with my principal around this. And I just want to see if Fountas and Pinnell will come out with any changes, or if they have their own action plan for this that has kind of come to light. And I will, since this is kind of the main resource that my district has right now, I will look to see if there are any quality books that can still be used, and make sure that there's no negative connotations used towards any of my students, and that they can still relate to the text, or that their voice is still heard within the characters, and that they can see it as mirrors. And for within the year, I want to begin finding some other leveled resources that include diversity and multicultural texts. And so we do have some online resources that I'll talk about in a little bit. And I think it'd be great if we could just find some other texts that celebrate diversity that we could kind of substitute out for some of those books in the Fountas and Pinnell kit. And then for the future, this is where I would love to get the school together and the grade levels to compile a list of books that can replace some of the books in the Fountas and Pinnell level literacy kits. And I think it'd be cool if we could present it to administration and kind of show the study behind it. The action plan that I have come up with for this first goal is to ask for parent involvement. And I think that this would be an interesting place to start, to see if within their culture, if they have any recommendations on books to use within our curriculum, and especially with the assessments. And I just feel like having that parent involvement is important to have that home and school connection. And then my main goal would be to make a Google document with our levels shared amongst all teachers and personnel within our building. And we can all add to it and include diverse text for each level that can be used. And if we don't have access to the book, then usually YouTube has a read aloud. And so maybe we could add that link in case purchasing it is not an option. And then the last part that I think is important is we do have the new Fountas and Pinnell reading mini lessons and interactive read aloud curriculum, and those have text sets. And I will say that after looking through those so far, they seem a lot more diverse than the level literacy kit books. And so I think it'd be important to really level those books out and see if we're able to use those within our assessments instead of the ones that were used in the study. For my second and final goal, I wanted to focus on one inside of the classroom, and this would be more student involvement in literacy assessments. For the rationale behind my second goal, I wanted to think about the why behind allowing students to create assessments with educators and the importance behind that. And one article that stuck out to me was written by Euler, and Euler discusses a three-prong focus. And so the first prong, working to engage all learners in the content by first understanding what is motivating, inviting, and relevant to them. I feel like this is crucial for the beginning of the year and those inventories, and making sure that we're truly understanding what is motivating our students and the information that's relevant to them. And they are able to use this motivation to create these assessments. And making sure that instructional materials have multiple meanings of access, and just making sure that all students can relate and have access to the assessments, which help in creating them. And also, Afflerbach also expresses that just kind of the explanation of rubrics and how it's detailed feedback about students' learning and comparing their work with the set of expectations. And so if students are creating rubrics with their teachers, then they really understand what's expected and can determine what they need to do to achieve that standard or what needs to be accomplished. And so the standards for the assessment of reading and writing also discuss the language that's used on rubric. And I believe that that language then is used in the classroom. And so those can kind of pair. We can bridge together assessment language with the language that's used in the classroom, and students can have a good idea and kind of really get to know what is at hand. In regard to the timeline for this second goal, for right now, I want to keep reviewing all of our district required assessments that we're using within our units. And a lot of these are rubrics that are kind of pre-made within task force over the summer, and just really seeing if they are authentic and kind of seeing where they can improve and getting my students' input on those. And so within the year, I would like to kind of outline some assessments or questionnaires that I can create with my students for the second semester of school and really start to include them on some of those required assessments from the district. And so we can look at the rubrics or the checklists that are provided and kind of see how we can tweak it to make it more so students are involved and they truly understand expectations. And so then for the future, I want to prepare different inventories for the beginning of the school year to make sure that I'm gaining knowledge on my students and especially their interests or their dislikes or their strengths or weaknesses to make sure that I understand and kind of gain an understanding of their funds of knowledge. And that way I can incorporate that information and bring them into helping me make the assessments and making sure that they're authentic. For my action plan for this second goal, I want to consider multimodal options for assessments, and I think giving students the option to choose their type of end result of the assessment I think is crucial because I can think of a few of my students who are very tech savvy and love to work on the computer versus just the regular pen and pencil method. And so I think if they are able to choose the assessment that they do for a certain task, then that would allow for some more motivation within them and they can really show off their strengths. And I also am going to keep looking at existing rubrics within our district and work with students to see how they can be changed to make sure that they understand the expectations and that the language is that they understand the language on the rubrics and we can kind of revise as we need to. And then students can create self-assessments within certain units. And so in math, we have a little self-assessment that they fill out after the questions that they take on the end of the unit assessments, but they don't feel very student friendly. And so I think we can really look at those and see maybe a quicker checklist or a different type of self-assessment for them to take. The barriers that I thought of as I was thinking about these goals would be the lack of funds to purchase diverse text. I wish I could purchase all the books, but of course, sometimes that just cannot be possible. And then freedom within the district. And so our district does have required assessments, and these assessments, we have certain data that we need to collect on our students. And so just deciding if we have some of that freedom to use other assessments that we create with our students within the district, and just having that freedom might become an issue. And then I do have some great supports with our librarian and also my principal. She's great at trying her best to get support wherever we need. And then the media and just the internet in general has an abundance of resources like Get Epic or any YouTube videos, things like that, where we can find some of the text.